Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session for 2022, the first session for the year. And so today we're going to hear about the GitLab Environment Toolkit, commonly referred to as GET. And so we have Grant Young, who's a staff software engineer, who's going to lead us through that discussion. So Grant, without much further ado, I'll let it over to you.
Okay, thanks. We've been working away on Get for a while now, and the idea is for it to be able to deploy GitLab at scale and take away all the pain points that kind of setup brings. Obviously, that means it's got quite a wide gamut. So I'm happy to go through a demo of how Get runs today. It's just a quick demo of how we run it against one of our Google environments. But usually with these sessions, I like to actually open it up and see what particular areas people want to ask about. But if there's nothing initially, I'll start showing you a kind of a quick demo now. So this will be against a standard environment that we have right now. Let me get the right screen up. Bear me a second, as always. Doing stuff live is 10 times harder. Okay, so the toolkit is boring by design. It's not meant to be anything too special, although we think it is a bit special. But by that I mean it's actually just Terraform and Ansible. That's all it is. We've added a bunch of Terraform modules and Ansible roles and playbooks that will configure GitLab when you run them in the right way. But essentially, although there's various permutations about how you want to do things, whether it's like on Amazon, Google, Microsoft, or you want to deploy a normal reference architecture, which is what Get's actually meant to do. I forgot to call that out. Get's primarily designed to deploy the various reference architectures we have now for GitLab. So you can deploy a full omnibus reference architecture where it just installs GitLab Omnibus and VMs, or you can deploy what we call a cloud native hybrid architecture, which is a mix of omnibus backends where the state is stored and running certain components of GitLab in Kubernetes, which don't contain state, such as Rails, Sidekick, and a few other things. So there's quite a wide gamut there, and then there's variations thereon about each cloud provider. There is several options you can do in each, depending on such things such as network. You could have Get create a network for you, or you can use the default, or you can provide one, stuff like that. So there's a wide and deep range of Gets. So that's why I say at the top, usually people have particular questions, they want to explore specific areas, but we'll do a quick demo first. So the first thing you always do is after you set up your config, which is you'll be guided through that in the docs, you need to run Terraform. So this is going to be running against the current environment, and it probably shouldn't have any changes because we've not made any changes recently. But what I'll do is I'll go through and check every VM and every kind of dependency, such as networking, object storage, other bits that is needed for GitLab to run. And I'll go through each and check if there's any changes to be made, and then I will actually go make those changes. On a brand new run, I'll just go through and create them in order. So this one, as you see, it's just come back and given us the outputs of all your VMs are created. There's nothing to be changed, but that's pretty much it. You just run Terraform apply once your config's in, and Get should handle everything for you once you've configured it for what you want to do. And on the Ansible piece, Ansible comes in once the VMs are running, or the Kubernetes cluster, if you're doing that kind of setup. And it will go through each node, it will go for the nodes in order and start installing GitLab Omnibus, or deploying the Helm chart if it's Kubernetes, and configure GitLab with the right config and and hooking everything up and making everything work together across a multi-node setup. So I'll run Ansible now, and then I'll open the floor to any questions. So again, it's just a standard Ansible command. We have an all playbook, which will now go through all the nodes, install. Well, in this case, I'll go through and update GitLab, apply any new config that's been added, etc. So yeah, that's a very high-level overview of Get, but like I say, I'm happy to open the floor up and answer any more specific questions about particular areas that people want to ask about. No question is a bad question in this case. Please feel free to ask absolutely anything.
Question, is there a way to set what reference architecture you're creating and whatnot? I might have missed that.
No, that's a fair question. So what you do is in Terraform, you actually will configure the file. Let me see if I can get one up. I usually don't show config because I'll have some sensitive stuff in there, and try to be careful. But let me see, Terraform I should be able to show. So give me a second. I'll show you a 10K one.
Thank you.
No problem at all. So let me try this. Okay, so this is a Terraform config file that we have to configure the module that we provide. We provide modules for GCP, AWS, Azure. Those modules will go off and they actually employ other modules to go off and create VMs, networking, etc. So we try and keep it all in one file. There's a few other files needed in Terraform world. There's 2 other files, but they're just for mainly for configuration against authentication against the cloud provider and some variables. But this is the main file where you actually say, here's all the VMs I want, or here's all the services I want, depending on the environment type you want. And in this, you'll see we actually have the machine types, the machine counts, and that's where you kind of de facto define the size of the reference architecture. This could be tweaked to, so if you want a 5K, you'd set smaller machine sizes, smaller machine counts, etc. We've got a list of all reference architectures for internal use. We don't have an external available list yet because we've just been looking for the right way to actually have a big list of example configs in a maintainable way. But we're going to be doing this soon. We need to get it done because people keep asking. So we will have a list soon that will be externally available as well.
Thank you.
No problem at all.
Hey, Grant.
Grant,
in the document, Vladimir, you want to voice your question there, Vladimir, or you want me?
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Forgive me if they're stupid.
Nope, no stupid questions.
So first question is, I know how the GET was created. This was created for us to quickly roll out environments to test and well, do the performance testing. Would you consider GET as also a tool to deploy productive installations? And if no, are there any future plans of getting in there? Because so I'm just asking. Currently, of course, rolling out bigger reference architectures is a bit of a pain. Documentation has a lot of multiple steps to follow that, and GET seems to be a much better way of doing this, but it's not our recommended official way of installation.
So the goal is to make it production ready. We're not there quite yet, but there's a lot of functionality in GET. So what we say today to customers and to yourselves and others is that, GET on a journey, and it can configure a base environment today for a customer to use, and then you can build upon that accordingly. And that will always be the case in some ways because customers have very specific security requirements or other kind of requirements that these. So there always will be some kind of additional day 2 kind of task there. So what we say today is a customer very welcome to trial and evaluate GET. If they think it meets the requirements, they're more welcome to give it a go. Support will support questions around environments built with GET, because once GET's done, it's just a standard GitLab environment. GET's not doing anything special here, so support will be able to debug it like normal. But there are some limitations. We call those out in the docs, and yeah, officially we just say, well, please try and evaluate. If it meets your needs, feel free to go. If it doesn't, let us know what we're missing, and we'll try and get that in for you. So that's the kind of guidance we give today.
Okay, cool. And I also have a second question. Basically, yep. I looked at GET a few weeks ago, and I think the documentation is stellar. I loved it. Super easy, super well documented. Of course, it is currently very well documented of how to use this to spin off your GitLab installation within one of the cloud providers, so either AWS or Google Cloud. However, the Ansible playbooks that are there, I believe, could be as well used for an on-premise installation. However, from the current documentation, it's not very obvious how you would do this. As a suggestion, also a question, could we include something in documentation and in order to provide some information how these Ansible playbooks could be used on non-cloud, on-premise infrastructure environments?
Yes, and yes, already done. We already support on-prem for Ansible. Let me get the page up. We added this a few weeks ago. It was something we knew we needed to do because there's obviously quite a lot of customers out there on-prem. We don't support the Terraform piece because the variations there would be unmanageable. But if a customer has the VMs ready to go, that's a much more flatter thing that we can support. So we do support static environments, essentially, as we call them. And it's just a few configuration changes in Get and the Ansible side to make it work. And you need to have a static inventory, obviously, as well for Ansible. So it is supported.
Awesome.
Please let me know how you get on with it, because obviously it's a bit of a tricky one because we don't actually have an on-prem setup to test against, but we have tested it best as we can. And we know of, I think, a few other people trying to use it. So if you give it a go, please let us know.
Adrian, you get the next one.
Yeah, hi Grant. Just wondering, before you made this sort of publicly available, we were seeing a lot of interest, particularly from partners. I just wonder if you got any feel for how widely it is being used, maybe based on questions you're being asked and so on.
Recently, we're starting to see more interest. And I'm talking quite recently, over the last month or so, we're starting to see a spike in interest in it. This is anecdotal, of course, but I'm seeing more questions coming from more users, more issues are being raised, more support tickets being raised. And we are starting to see that increasing, which is expected. We expected this to be a bit of a slow start. But yeah, it's starting to go what we think is probably an exponential curve at this point, and that's both exciting and scary at the same time. But as always with these cases, but it's good to see it starting to go. We've got, like, for example, we've had an MR literally today from an external from a customer, just fixing. They found one tiny little bug in the code, and they've submitted an MR to fix it, which is great. And we're getting more and more of that. So yeah, it's starting to increase. But yeah, like, so we keep the message clear of we're still building this. This is still on a journey. We've done a lot of work. We're very proud of it. There's still more to go. Make sure it does actually meet your requirements, particularly when it comes to security and other things. If there's anything missing there, we definitely need to know about it. So
okay, thanks.
No problem at all.
Mark, you want to vocalize your question?
Sure. I just be interested in know, are we using this for testing GitLab's performance or publishing anything around that?
So the toolkit genesis was actually to test performance. Yeah, we needed a way in Quality to build out and test essentially real environments. And this all kind of was kind of a loop, kind of fed into itself. We needed to define what environments would GitLab look like, in the real world that we can test against, real life targets, and that's now called the reference architecture. So we had to build those first, and then we needed a way to build those architectures out. So we actually built something called the Performance Environment Builder, which is what became Get, and we built that out first to actually build out the environments, and then we built GPT, which you might know of, which is our performance testing tool. So it's kind of a self-feeding cycle. The reference architectures are defined, Get builds the reference architectures, and GPT tests against them. We test these a range between daily and weekly, depending on what we think are the most popular reference architectures. We have those available on our wiki, and I can link that to you, where you can see literally daily updates of the latest performance metrics.
Great. And those are shareable with customers, right? Totally transparent.
Yes. Yeah, the wiki is completely open. Yeah. So is GPT and Get and the reference architectures of customer. We find actually one thing we didn't actually expect was customers actually use GPT themselves. during the build process, and then in some cases after. So they just have, it's kind of like a health check, just to see, is the performance still good, or is the performance of the new build, is the performance of the new environment we've just built actually to par. So all very open in that regard. Excuse me.
Samir, you get the next one.
Yes, Grant, thank you for doing this presentation. This is excellent. This has been a very interesting thing that we've been looking at, and thank you again for putting this together. As far as my question goes, does Get work with the GitLab Agent for Kubernetes? Like, does it do the installation? Does it do validation? Like, what's the scope of how it interacts with it, if it does?
The GitLab Agent for Kubernetes, could you clarify that for me, just to make sure I've got the right understanding?
So there is a agent that the ops team has put together, which essentially does a GitOps model, where the agent lives in the Kubernetes cluster and it interacts with GitLab. So you don't do a push through a runner to install your application that you're developing in GitLab. Use the Kubernetes agent to do a pull. There's an agent, and then there's a server that goes along with it, and so on and so forth. So I'm kind of curious if is Get agnostic to that, in the sense that it's already in the manifest that we provide to Get, or does Get actually do anything with it directly?
Yeah, it doesn't do anything directly with the GitLab Agent functionality directly right now. I'm just trying to remember how that works exactly. That when it comes to runner stuff, Get doesn't do that right now, because runners are actually a little bit unautomatable in various little ways. What Get will do is give you a base environment, and then you're more than welcome to configure it after the fact, of course, to add in the runners or the Kubernetes agent in this case. But if you think there is scope to automate that process, feel free to raise an issue, and we can take a look at it.
Yeah, so what I just did is I posted the documents link for what the Kubernetes agent is, for everybody to kind of know what I was referring to. I think that there was a name change recently, and that's why there might be some confusion around that. In any case, I think there is some scope for it to be automated, in the sense that it is a difficult component to get installed and working. And if there is any automation that can be applied to it, I'm sure it would go a long way. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It would. I assume the agent would be in its own Kubernetes cluster. Is that the right take?
Doesn't have to be, from what I've heard. It can be. It could be within the cluster that you're deploying the apps to, or it could be in its own. I think for security purposes, they propose to do it in its own, so that it's isolated.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Yeah. So the Get supports deploying GitLab itself, the actual application, into its own cluster, and that has been a tremendous effort to get that to work to where we need it to be. At the moment, they probably would be before we'd be reticent to introduce a second cluster to deploy an agent into, because there's various reasons for that. But the other reason is that we're getting into opinionated territory. How that looks for different customers is different, and it would be difficult to try and get a one solution that fits all. But we'll take a look and see if there's any scope there for sure. But yeah, when it comes to, like, say, that deployments kind of piece, when customers either want to use runner or Kubernetes, we usually will empower them to do it. But we'll take a look and see if there's anything that makes sense there.
Thank you.
No problem at all.
Yep, we have no more questions in the doc, Grant.
Okay. That's fine. So what I'll say is that usually with these presentations, like I say, I usually try and keep it light, because it's a very quick, like, even in that conversation, Get can easily deep dive and become very technical very quickly. And I present to different audiences all the time, so it's always hard to gauge where the level that we want to kind of present on. So the high level is very high level today. I'm happy to go over any other pieces. If people just say, can you go over a bit of Kubernetes, Cloud Native, or stuff like that, feel free to shout out, and I'll do that for you. But yeah, any other questions you have, or anything else you want me to cover with the Get kind of design, happy to discuss that now, or even the reference architectures. I'm heavily involved with those as well, so I can discuss those too. Silence. Always a worrying or a good thing, hard to tell between the two. Okay, so let me run off some features of Get and see if that brings out any interest in people to discuss. So currently Get supports we can deploy all the reference architectures from 1K to 50K, including the cloud native hybrid variants. We have support for Amazon, Azure, and GitLab, Amazon, Azure, and Google for deploying the omnibus environments. We have support for AWS and GCP for the cloud native hybrid environments. There is no plan to support the Azure Kubernetes service at the moment. We're discussing that on a larger scale about Azure services because we've continuously had problems with Azure's offerings. So nothing to discuss on that point for now. The Get supports upgrades. It supports being able to supports upgrades. We do support Elasticsearch at the moment for advanced search. We're re-evaluating that with the license change, but at the moment you can deploy an Elasticsearch version that is the version that doesn't have the license change. We want to look at other stuff in the future, such as just the OpenSearch stuff, but that's not quite ready yet. We do support Geo. We support zero downtime upgrades. Get will also support some other additional things such as adding in load balancing. We do support setting up the monitor piece in Omnibus, so that's Prometheus and Grafana that GitLab provides. We support external SSL termination, and we support certain services, mainly AWS right now. We support RDS and Elasticache. And on AWS as well, we do support the internal load balancer being a cloud AWS NLB load balancer. Those are the areas we're still expanding. So hopefully we'll have more on that piece with Google and external load balancer stuff in the future. The Get project has a whole bunch of issues. You'll see what we're trying to work on. We're working on the 2.0 release right now, which is going to have a whole bunch of changes and big improvements coming. That's hopefully going to be, you'll see a beta probably the end of next week, and then probably the main release will be in the middle of February, and then we just continue. 2.1 we'll have we'll be continuing to add new features, those missing areas. One of the big questions I get is about Red Hat. We're planning to do 2.1. We might actually be doing a 2.0 because someone's actually made an MR that actually seems to be working, which is good. We've expected it to be a lot harder, but it actually seems like we've made a lot of sensible choices in the past. So actually the switch to support RHEL seems to be a lighter touch. So watch the space. If that does come in 2.0, we'll be shouting about it from the rooftops because I know that people have been wanting that for a while. So that's a whole bunch of stuff there. Does anyone want to discuss any of those points in more detail or any questions?
Grant, this is Samir again. I apologize. You ran through the list quickly. Did you mention Red Hat OpenShift on there?
I did mention OpenShift. No, not at this moment. No.
Okay, thank you.
I can get the list up as well on the screen. There is the Red Hat operator, which I know the distribution team are working on. We don't support that yet. We support Helm. We're going to evaluate that in the future when the time is right to see if you want to either switch from Helm to operator or backwards or whatever we want to do. But yeah, there's nothing to announce on that bit for now.
Grant, thanks for doing that. Gronk here. A pretty generic question. What would be reasons where we would not recommend using Get? What would trigger a recommendation against it, other than the obvious certain platforms not supported?
That stuff we're still trying to figure out. We're excited to see more customers use it because we want to get that feedback more. What will probably be the case is that customers need bespoke kind of designs around the networking or the security. That's the two big areas probably you'll start to see maybe some friction, where they have, like, if they have very strict security requirements that they can't change, they must have this, and that. We might not have that in place, or the networking needs to be in a certain way. Again, we have generic networking kind of designs, although we do allow customers to literally stick in their own networking if needed. So it really depends on the customer's requirements. I suspect there won't be typically one reason why that would happen. It completely depends on their own requirements. So if you hear anything, please let us know. We're certainly keen to hear those areas that would prevent customers from using Get. Previously has been reasons such as rel support or private subnet support was one we got a few times. We're working on that literally as we speak, in AWS at least. And yeah, I can't remember anything else off the top of my head. Some customers just want to do it themselves. That's also another thing you'll start to see, and that's okay. The whole point about Get is that it's not trying to become a unicorn. It doesn't. We strictly won't do anything Get that you can't do yourself, because if you start doing unique functionality in Get that's not on the bus or Helm or the various other deployment methods that GitLab has, then it becomes another pillar, and that means people will need to use Get to get that functionality, which is not the point of Get. Get is just here taking the existing stuff and just automating the pain of getting those all singing and dancing to get together. So yeah, if I hear anything from customers, I'll let you know. But yeah, please let me know if you hear anything either.
Yeah, thanks. We'll do, I think.
Great. So I'll call it some things we don't plan to include, and there's various reasons for that. So we generally won't handle cloud accounts in Get. That's a very murky area. Depends completely. Usually has various considerations for customers on security, passwords, all that. So Get won't usually generate accounts. There might sometimes be some like automated accounting. Technically it would be accounts, but just pieces in the cloud providers to make things work, like service accounts in GCP, that kind of stuff. But generally we won't do that. We won't support anything outside of Prometheus and Grafana directly. And by that I mean we're not. We know that customers usually will bring their own monitoring stack, and that will be very different depending on each customer. We will obviously try and support letting customers plug that in to get into their GitLab environment. Sorry, but yeah, we only automate the main Prometheus and Grafana omnibus piece. But yeah, we don't do anything more than that. We also don't support directly omnibus and omni-auth and email support, because again, the variations that each customer will have will just be, it's just massive. If you look at the email list particularly, there's numerous different email providers that you could use. But what we do is we do support custom config. So this is a concept where a customer can set up Get and also then literally paste in like a Ruby file, config file that then would be added to the different components in GitLab. So you can add in your own specific omni-auth or email support with your own file, and Get will take that and add it in the right place and merge it in and apply that config for you. So we're confident hopefully that'll cover most people's bases, but it's good to call that out as well. Enough wittering from me. Any other questions? Any other discussion points about Get, reference architectures, GitLab at scale? Happy to discuss that, but if not, I think that's enough. You've heard enough from me today, so.
Well, thanks, Grant. I don't see any questions in the document, so but that's great. Yeah, thanks for the information on Get. Learned quite a bit today about the Get.
Yeah, it's certainly it's a lot to take in. Take it from me. So what we'll say is that we've got the GitLab Environment Toolkit Slack channel. You're very much welcome to come over there and ask any question, discuss anything.
Okay.
Like I say, there is no stupid questions. We have the GitLab Environment Toolkit project. You can raise issues. When it comes to MRs, because Get's is quite specialized, what we say is raise an issue first, or speak to us on the channel if you want to do an MR, and we could discuss together about potential ramifications and stuff, and maybe the correct way to do it. What we will rarely say no to anything. there'll be some times where things can't work, but we will try and find a compromise. But we certainly want to encourage any contribution and anybody wants to come in and help us on the journey. So yeah, feel free to reach out and hopefully this has been helpful.
Great.
Thank you, Rand.
Thank you all. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Grant. Have a great day.
Same to you all. Thanks now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.